It's just because that's what they're doing does not mean that's how they got to where they are. It just doesn't mean that. There's a lot of the big podcasts have a lot of money behind them. Barstool has a ton of money behind the podcasts. They're doing a lot of things that most humans just can't do. Myself included. Their budget is way, 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 way higher than mine. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all of the time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode number 121, the 2 different directions to take your podcast business, listener ladders and guest ladders. I got invited to speak at a virtual conference, and that is what I will be talking about. Maybe we will go deeper. I don't know. We'll find out. I will keep everybody updated. Evidently, it's totally free to attend, and that's something I asked. I said, can I get a link for the podcast growth community? And he said, absolutely. It's totally free to attend. Replays, I think, cost money, but if you're able to attend live, awesome. I will keep everybody in the loop for that. So today, for episode number 122, are you making this social media mistake? I am guilty as charged. I've done a lot of podcast breakthrough sessions recently. Last quarter, I did a bunch. And one of the things that I'm really, really, really seeing is something that I was very, very guilty of, and I'm trying to work my way out of that guilt. So I'm not talking down to you. I'm not on my soapbox, because this is a mistake that I've made on repeat for the last 7 years. And we'll kind of dive into it. So when I am doing a podcast breakthrough session, for prep, I usually listen to a little bit of somebody's episode. I check out to see if they're on YouTube. I look at their social media. I listen for the audio quality. I look at the show notes. I look at the artwork. I look at the name, all that stuff. And when I'm looking at social media, what I'm trying to look at is to see if there's any reason anybody would follow their social media. Now, I know that probably sounds mean. I don't mean it that way, but this has been my thought recently. Okay. If all you do for your social media is share podcast clips or podcast content, why would anybody who is not interested in your podcast follow you on social media? That's really what we're talking about today. Number one, yeah, you can have a podcast-specific social media. I still don't recommend it. I think having a personal brand social media is probably better. And this is my thought. If I post a picture of me in the gym flexing, and somebody who is a bodybuilder or somebody who is into fitness or whatever it is, somebody who values the gym, they might like that and they might follow me. And then 7 posts later, they might see a clip from the podcast and say, oh, wow, I didn't know Kevin had a podcast. Because that's not why they came. They didn't come to my social media because of the podcast. On social media, where it's very easy to only optimize for one thing. So I think what's happening for a lot of us, again, myself included, this has happened many times over the last 7 years. We think to ourselves, okay, I had X amount of listens last month, and I know some of those people are following me on social media. I want to put out content that's going to keep them engaged, and maybe they'll go listen to the podcast. Sure, great idea. I love that idea. But the goal of social media is to grow social media. If in theory, and again, this is in theory, if you grow your social media, you will in theory grow your opportunity for podcast listeners if they are interested in what you're doing. So for me, it's the numbers game. Would you rather have 50 people follow a social media account? And here's why it's super hard. You don't really even know if those 50 people are actually listening to the show unless you are doing the due diligence. So even that, I'm not even going to use that example because I don't think it's actually true. The thought that I have is I would rather somebody follow me on social media because of something I post that's not podcast related than a bunch of people not follow me because it's all podcast stuff. So it's really just a numbers game at the end of the day. And here's the other thing too. You're not just a podcast. You're a personal brand. I say this to clients all the time. You are way more than a podcast. You have a great relationship. Maybe you have a different job. Maybe you have children. Maybe you have pets. Maybe you have hobbies, whatever it may be. what are the pillars of your brand? So if you were to go on my social media right now, what would we see? I'm going to say Instagram specifically. Okay, the top 3 on Instagram, the top 3 pictures are my wife and I for our engagement shoot, a quote that got a lot of love, and then my episode number 1000 appreciation post where I'm crying my eyes out. Then it's a throwback picture. It's a custom video I recorded for social media. It's me on another podcast. It's a picture from me traveling. It's a Podcast Growth U clip. It's a custom piece of content. The next 3 are quote, picture, custom content, picture, custom content, picture. I don't think we're in the space anymore where if you are relatively unknown as a podcaster, where you're really going to get away with just posting podcast clips to grow. We're just in a different place now where you're competing with other people that are content creators and they are spending hours creating content. I tested a video the other day where I started in the living room with the first piece of it, and then I went into the hallway, and then I went to the kitchen, and I went to the dining room, and then I finished in the office, I think. And I was thinking to myself, let me try to spend a half hour creating one piece of content to see if it does anything. And statistically, it did better than the other content that I've been creating. Now, again, I don't have 500,000 followers. I am by no stretch of the imagination a social media expert, but I do know when it comes to podcasting specifically, it's going to be really hard to grow your social media just repurposing podcast clips. And here's the other thing. We did an episode on this. We did an episode all about AI. I love it. Artificial intelligence is great. ChatGPT is awesome. All this other stuff's really good. Opus clips, Riverside viral clips, that type of stuff, it's okay. But it's going to be very hard for you to just hammer those every single day and maintain or grow some level of following. Because, honestly, those clips aren't that great. And again, I love Opus clips. We use it for the subtitles more than anything. But all of our clips are human chosen. Just because, and again, resources, I understand not everybody has that ability. Not everybody has a team. Not everybody can do video editing. Just don't fall into the trap of thinking, awesome, I'm creating 7 clips a week, I'm putting them up on my social media, and maybe it feels like something's happening, and that's great, or maybe it doesn't feel like something's happening, and we need to re-strategize. So the mistake that I'm talking about, I'm fired up today. I don't know why I'm so fired up. The mistake that I'm talking about is, 1, just repurposing podcast content. That's 1. 2, just using Opus clips or Riverside viral moments or whatever the labels are based on the platforms. It makes your life a lot easier, yes. But if you're just relying on that to take the clips from the podcast, you could do a better video just custom than something you said on the podcast. I mean, if we really think about that, right? Imagine, again, we're going to pull clips from this. It's not going to be the majority of my social media, but what do you think would be higher quality? Me sitting down and doing a 20-minute episode and then finding the best clip, or me saying, all right, cool, I have 1 minute to add as much value as humanly possible and go. And then I can do a hook, story, lesson, call to action in a minute. The second one's going to be more valuable for sure because I'm intentionally creating it for a specific platform. That's the mistake that I'm seeing. Now, again, I'm not saying not to promote your podcast on social media. I'm not saying that. I would just probably split it up. I would probably do, if you have 3 brand pillars or 5 brand pillars, I would go through those. So for me, it's health, wealth, and love. Health, you will see me on my story every day at the gym, right? Wealth, that's mostly like perception. So my wife and I went to Scotland. When we go to Vermont, sometimes I'll take a picture of my car, whatever it is. And again, don't fake it till you make it. Not that type of stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But for us, it's health, wealth, and love. And then love is pictures of my wife and I. And that's something I could probably do better at. I think I'm lagging on that just because I have to get more pictures of my wife and I. But if you look at my social media, you should have a pretty good understanding of what are the brand pillars based on the things that you see. If I only see podcast clips, I'm not really going to know. Who are you? I want to connect with you. I don't want to follow your social media just to see podcast clips. If I wanted to do that, I would just listen to the podcast. What about you? What do you do in the world? What are you passionate about? What are your hobbies? What are your brand pillars? So that's the mistake that I'm seeing a lot. It's somebody starts a podcast. They usually go from not really using social media to doing a really good job of posting consistently, except they're only posting podcast stuff. And it's just, I don't think it's the best way to do it. Because if you were thinking of what's the best way to grow a social media account, it most likely wouldn't be repurposing anything.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurwitz. So last year I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
Yes, there are different times. If I go give a speech in front of 50,000 people, you better believe I'm going to repurpose that content, but that's going to help with credibility. Because, Kev, how did you speak in front of 50,000 people? I didn't really, but you know what I mean. So that's going to help with credibility. That's different. It's not the same. If we were to have The Rock on our podcast, that's different, right? And if you're having guests, yes, you want to promote the episodes and you want to get the guests to share them, but I genuinely don't believe that should be everything. I think it's too much of a swing. It's too much of a swing because on social media, we want to optimize for engagement. That's the way the algorithm works. So I would rather put up a picture of me and my cats and get people that like cats to follow me, and eventually maybe they listen to the podcast. If not, at least I know I'm making meaningful progress in social media land. Right? I'm not expecting a ton of conversion. I'm just not. But that doesn't mean I should just plaster my social media with podcast content. And again, we have had seasons where it was 7 posts a week would be just 7 clips. We were very overwhelmed. We were very focused on the business and the podcast. We weren't really focused on social media that much. So it was just set it and forget it. I'm not making it wrong to go through these seasons. Now more than ever, I am just way more intentional with creating content. So today, right now it's 10:41 a.m. as the time of recording this. There's a podcast conference that I'm attending today virtually through Podmatch. Shout out to anybody who will be there. And today's the 17th of October. I also signed up, and I'm signed up for Podmatch, so I have access to the replays. There is a piece of me. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what the value of being there live is. If there's not a ton of value to be there live and I can just watch the replay, I'm going to record content. I might go for a walk and record content. I'm going to do some stuff because I'm understanding and realizing now that taking time intentionally to create content is what's going to separate you from other people. TikTok's a really good example for me. Podcast repurpose clips do, I don't know, a third as well as me recording videos in terms of saves, in terms of likes, in terms of comments. And again, I'm not a social media expert. I've been doing it a long time, and I understand a lot of the psychology of it, but I haven't been intentional with it as much as I could. So this is me talking to me as much as anybody else. And I think that's the reason I'm so excited in this episode is because I feel like I'm doing this with you, and we're doing it together, which is very, very exciting for me. So that's the mistake I'm seeing. Are there any other mistakes? Yeah, tag your guest. There's a lot of people I'm seeing when I go to research their shows where they don't tag their guests. They just put up a static picture. Hey, today for episode number 56, we talked to Brittany Smith, and Brittany Smith isn't tagged, so she can't share it to her story even if she wants to. Collaboration posts are good on Instagram, that type of stuff. Collaboration. I don't know if you can collaborate on TikTok. I don't use TikTok a ton other than just putting content there and then sending messages to people that follow and just saying, hey, thanks so much. And we don't have guests, so it's different, right? I'm not really optimizing for collaborations. The other thing that I think social media is really focused on right now is shareability. So I've been testing quotes a lot more, and the quotes that get shared obviously do better, and there's something to that. So that's the other thing, is who's really going to share a podcast clip of a person they don't know and a person they kind of know. It might not happen. Now, I understand you're probably screaming at me, well, what about the big podcasts that do that? It's different. It's just because that's what they're doing does not mean that's how they got to where they are. It just doesn't mean that. There's a lot of the big podcasts have a lot of money behind them. Barstool has a ton of money behind the podcasts. They're doing a lot of things that most humans just can't do, myself included. Their budget is way, 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 way higher than mine. A lot of the Diary of a CEO, I'm pretty sure he was like a multimillionaire before he started the podcast. So he had access to funds. He could do paid ads. He can do marketing strategies. It's a little bit different. So I'm not saying it's not valuable. I'm just saying I wouldn't build your entire social media presence around the podcast. That's all I'm saying. Coming from somebody who could do that, I could post several clips every day. Right? We could post 3 clips a day. We could do 21 clips a week. I don't think it would do anything. Not as much as me creating content and living my life. That's my takeaway for today's episode. All right. Is there anything else I would add? Are you making this social media mistake? Tags, collaborations. No, it would pretty much be that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a podcast-specific social media. I have just seen it not really work for almost anyone other than, again, 1% of 1% of 1%. Even if you look at somebody famous, look at their social media, their personal, and then look at their business. Their business never has as many followers as the personal does. But I wonder what gets them more business, the personal one or the business one. I'm willing to bet it's probably the personal one. Right? It's not, we're in a personal brand place right now where this podcast and NLU are a piece of what I do. Now, they're a very big piece of what I do, right? Without the podcast, you wouldn't know who I am because you wouldn't have anything to listen to. But it's not all I do. I do other things. And what I've noticed is there's certain people who only react on certain stories. So when I put up my picture from the gym, certain people, they give me the flex emoji or hearts or whatever it is. But they never do that with podcast content. Interesting. There's certain people who, if I do a vulnerable video, I get a ton of love from them, but I never get it from fitness stuff. Interesting. That's what I'm talking about here today. Everybody is following you for a different reason, and that's good. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I would rather that happen. You never know. Somebody might reach out in 6 months and say, oh, I didn't realize you had a podcast. Boom. But they never would have followed you in the first place if all you did was post podcast stuff. That is my takeaway for today's episode, my friends. All right, if you feel like you are struggling with identifying your audience, with figuring out what your offer is, with getting more listeners, with getting more listens, getting on other shows, getting higher level guests, whatever it is, I'll have my link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. What else is there? I'm writing a book. I think I mentioned that. I don't know when that's going to be done because writing a book is a whole thing. Super excited for that, though. Speaking at this conference, I will keep everybody in the loop since it's free. I'm never going to try to get you to sign up for something that's like behind the scenes, makes me money and you have to pay for it. Like that. Like obviously when I sell a book, it's going to cost money and I will make money. But it's never going to be, I'm speaking at this event and I'm getting paid $5,000 and everybody who signs up using my unique code, it costs them $100 and then I get $15 back. Like, I don't want to do that. And if I ever did, I would just tell you, like, I'm getting a kickback. But this one's totally free. That was kind of one of the things that I was contingent upon. I wanted to make sure that the wonderful Podcast Growth U community and NLU community could attend if they wanted to. All right, what do I hope for you today on this wonderful Friday? Yeah, I hope this episode made sense, and I hope there was a breakthrough in it. Because for me, it makes total sense now, but I also have had more clarity around it, and I have a little bit more time to create content. Creating content takes a lot of time. And if you don't have that time, it becomes this ladder. If you're not posting anything, something is most likely better than nothing. If you're posting something and you have some time, creating more intentionally is probably a valid use of your time. And then it goes down and down and down and down. So if you're repurposing clips all day, every day, or pictures or whatever it is, it's better than doing nothing. But I think an improvement would be getting away from that and then just having more balance in terms of your personal brand. So I hope that makes sense. I hope your internet connection is strong. Something I probably take for granted far too often. I hope your audio quality is crisp. I hope if you were in the North Carolina, South Carolina, the southeast of the U.S., you're doing okay. Because it's been mayhem. And I know I'm recording this. It's going to be a couple weeks before this comes out. But yeah, shout out to anybody who went through all of that stuff. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're okay. And I'm sending you all the love. Weird times, man. Weird times. All right. Until next week, keep on crushing it. Keep on podcasting. And I will talk to you then.